This is Creating Your Encore Career and Becoming a Silver Entrepreneur with your host, Lynn Freest. Lynn will share ideas and expert advice from people that are walking in your shoes and living their encore careers, where they want and at the pace they want. You'll start a company of one with confidence and knowledge to live a fulfilled life of freedom and ease. Lynn is a coach and leadership consultant whose mission is to show senior leaders and experts how to start something refreshing and new after a full career in the corporate environment.
Well, welcome to this episode of Creating Your Encore Life. This is where you can learn to do the work you love, when you want, and where you want. You can live the dream. And you can be creating value in the world beyond just winning that next pickleball game or maybe getting that next piece of performance management done. Whatever your choice is. And if you're ready to get started today, please contact me at lynn@lynnfreest.com. And again, thanks for sharing your time with me. So this is episode 207. And this is some more thoughts on transitions and making transitions. Now, back in episode 203, I did some of this and I worked and talked mainly about the books by Bruce Feiler, which a book on transitions and also Search for Meaningful Work. Those were some ideas I had around transitions then. But today I'd like to really share a few more ideas with you. Now, all of these are worth much more explanation than I'll give in this episode, but I just wanted to throw out some ideas and some resources. So some of these you could explore some more on your own, given the books and the people you might check into. So it's going to be 10 more ideas on transitions, and I've got an extra one in there at the end for you. So the first thing in terms of transitions I think of is, how do we create awareness? And how do we notice things? A lot of that is, I won't say we're on autopilot, but we are on a set of habits, things we're doing each and every day. And this is no matter what age we are. It could be that you're in your 30s and you're striving, and we'll talk about that later, but we've got a routine and we've got things we're doing. So some of this, when we talk about transitions, one, the transition may not be our choice. And so we're disrupted to say the very least. But the first step is always, I think, creating awareness, noticing things. And for me, one of the ways to do that is to journal. Again, it gets things out of my head and onto a piece of paper. I came across this several years ago. Julia Cameron had a book on the artist's way, and she actually has several books on this same idea. But one of the key elements in there is journaling every day, and they call it daily pages. Now, this isn't something, in her case, it's just writing whatever comes to mind. Another way to think of it, she suggests you're just getting stuff out of your head so that then you can turn your attention and your thinking towards something else once you've cleared out the cobwebs of whatever's stirring around in your mind. So again, this whole idea of starting to be aware and noticing things and then writing about them, I think is a good starting point when you're either choosing a transition or facing one that you didn't choose. The next idea is around the emotions we feel. Now, interestingly, in doing some work with Michelle Navarro, she wrote the book Beyond Emotional Intelligence. She talks there about how emotions are constructed and how a lot of it is just we have to start noticing where they are, where they come from. One interesting thing in her book, again, building on work by some neuroscientists, she said, if we notice what our body is feeling intense, we're actually sensing some of these things before we actually are aware of them. You can feel your body tense up before you even get frightened or scared or sad or whatever it is. But this whole idea of, again, going back to the first point, noticing what are the emotions, and we're going to examine them, and by and large, you're going to live with them. You can maybe moderate or shift your attention, but emotions are there, and you just have to acknowledge that they're there. Another thing that Michelle worked on is, now you can use prompts in terms of when you're journaling or just to, again, improve your awareness. And she has a set of 12 self-discoveries. But there are things that are prompts that say, hey, just think about this question for a while. And so again, that's item 3 is you're trying to know yourself and trying to also understand others. So that, again, we're back to the awareness, the just recognizing, noticing things. So but things like these prompts are something there that'll help you start noticing more. Often we get wrapped up in whatever we're experiencing in a transition, and then we lose track of what's happening to other people, because other people, loved ones, or just people around you may going through the same thing. So it's one of those things just have to, again, thinking about it, being aware. Then the fourth item that came to mind for me is, what's your purpose? What's important now? Especially as you think of transitions. Inherently, they mean something's going to be different or could be different. Now, there's an old book, I wouldn't say that old, but it's some years ago, but it's Gail Sheehy had a book called Passages. And it's still an interesting way to think about what are some of the things that might be common in different stages of life, whether you're just entering college, coming out of college, starting a family, becoming an empty nester. There are certain things you're going through in life, and they're different. And you have to think about what's important now. Maybe what's important now is to be raising children. Maybe what's important now is to be focusing on my career. Whatever it is, it's that whole idea of just spend some time thinking about what's your purpose. And again, the transition, you would be choosing a transition, or it may have been thrust upon you. But even given that, it's involuntary transition. What's your purpose? What is you want to go on to next, kind of a thing. Now, the next piece is number 5 is the difference between striving and significance. And I think of that I probably talked about that in several earlier episodes, but the idea of often, especially as we in our 20s, 30s, even in our 40s, we're trying to become successful. We're trying to achieve things. We're trying to really make things happen. But also sometimes we're just, quite frankly, on a hamster wheel. We're racing as fast as we can, trying to keep up. So some of that's going on. We're not really necessarily know what we're going after, maybe somebody else's goals in some cases. But then there's this piece of significance. And sometimes that comes in the second half of life. But I really believe it could come at any point in your life. But that idea of thinking, I'm just not trying to get the next raise, or I'm not trying to win the next game. But what am I doing that's of significance, both to me and maybe to others? So sometimes that significance piece is you're looking beyond yourself as to what's important. Then item number 6 is, how do we make some of this happen, especially when we're in a phase of transition? And I'd like to go back to B.J. Fogg in his book, Tiny Habits. And I've been acquainted with his sister, Linda Fogg Phillips. But this whole idea of making small, consistent steps, and he calls it tiny habits, because I think inherently in any transition it means something's going to be different, which means we're disrupting the existing patterns, routines, habits that we have. And we want to be somewhat intentional about, okay, what are we going to replace those with in whatever we're trying to do as we move through this transition? And sometimes the transition can be big, it can be overwhelming. And it's always this piece you come back to. If you're able to take small, consistent steps, you can really get quite a ways. It's sometimes when we're trying to say, I need to make a big leap of faith or skills or whatever. This whole idea of making small, consistent steps, I think, is invaluable. Moving on to number 7. Again, I've talked to this a couple of different times, is the portfolio life. As you get into a transition and understand, just as what was in Bruce Feller's earlier book, it's not about a single transition. In fact, you're going to have multiple transitions in life. And so you really have to be thinking of, okay, whatever it is, whether it be a new job or whether it be a new stage of life, it's probably not the last transition you'll make. So you think of your life as always being in remix mode all the time, or at least periodically. Or another way, as I mentioned before, the portfolio life. You may have a variety of things that are going on in life. There may be a focus at one point on one element of your life, and a few years later, there may be a focus on a different point. But the whole idea is, how do we do a remix of the things we do? You know, the common way we talk about that is things like transferable skills. But I would say it's also transferable interests. So your skills in project management may be great as you go to get yourself involved in nonprofit work, or any number of things like that. Your skills in music may be great as you try to help people understand themselves. How can you help them through the background you have in music, for example? So it's this whole idea of we're not static. Now, I had one of these careers of 40-some years with one company, but as I look back on it, I was reinventing myself and being helped by other people in the company with new assignments, different assignments. I was always looking for a different activity, went to 3 different facilities in my career. So I think this whole idea of remixing your life or considering the fact that you have a portfolio life or what are your transferable skills is worth spending some time and attention on. And then just along with that, the nonlinear act of life. And life is as being a journey. The world is changing and has been. If you stop and reflect, what was the world before and after the airplane light? How did that change things? The same with TV. What was the world before the TV? What was the world like after TV? Another one of my favorite ones that's not an obvious one, but people have suggested that global trade came about because of the invention of the shipping container. What could be more mundane than a big metal box? But that shipping container, the fact that they standardized the size of how you could move things around the globe made a big difference. And now, of course, we're in the middle of the smartphone. Think back, it's not that many years ago before you had smartphones versus now. And then what's just hitting us in this very year is artificial intelligence and chat GPT and these things. And so all of a sudden, there's a lot of fear out there, but I've been seeing some really exciting and interesting things. It's kind of like having a little automated intern or actually a bunch of little automated interns to work for you. So we don't know how that one's going to turn out. I think it can be okay, but just as with smartphones, TV, I'm sure it's got some downsides and we'll have to manage those. Number 9 is really remembering, again, going back to how you go through transitions and how you make this work. There's a mind and body connection. And we just need to keep aware of that if your mind's not feeling well, probably reflected in your body. And likewise. So it probably in Western world, we underestimate that, although we're gaining a better and better awareness of that all the time. But I think one of the books I talked about some time ago on a podcast was Breaking the Age Code. Anyway, it was a book by Becca Levy. And she says, depending on if you have a positive outward look towards life, that will add 7 years onto your life. Okay. So all this stuff makes a difference. And again, don't neglect one side or the other side. I recently saw a thing on Instagram where a guy put out the thing and said, we sometimes use our health to create wealth. In other words, we sacrifice our health to create our wealth, only to find out later, then we're going to have to use our wealth to try to recover our health. So it's one of those things. Maybe if we're mindful of keeping that in a better balance, it'll work out better for us in the long run. Number 10 then is the idea of when we get to a transition, we have to let go. We have to let go of things, thoughts, feelings, people, any number of things. Because if we don't let go of some things, it'll keep us stuck in the past and it'll just inhibit our moving forward and really moving through and into the next stage of whatever is up for us in our life. And it's Dr. Henry Cloud has a book called Necessary Endings that is a nice discussion of that. So it's one of those things. I've mentioned this before. If you're going to become an entrepreneur, say, you probably need to find some peers and some new friends that are entrepreneurs to support you on that journey. Maybe some of the old friends that really don't understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur. Maybe you'll spend less time with them. So it's one of those things, but I think letting go is important. Now, some of it's letting go of your mindset, letting go of your old routines. All those things can happen but it's, as Henry Cloud says, there are necessary endings that need to happen as you move through a transition. Then the extra idea, the final one that I wanted to share with you comes from a book by Reid Hoffman, who was one of the founders of LinkedIn, and it was called The Alliance. But he talks about considering what you do a tour of duty, which might be 1 to 3 years or something like that. But whether it's for your personal life, your professional life, or even your family, there are tours of duty. So you're going to go through a 3-year or 1 to 3 year period where some focus or some aspect of your life really needs attention, but you also need to prepare that you're going to do something else 3 years down the road, or the world will change for you. So it's that whole idea of you don't put your whole identity into your job, what your circumstances are today, but you have to be flexible, saying, I'm going to do this for the next period of time, but you know what? Then I'll probably be doing something slightly different, or maybe I'll shift what I'm doing there. So this whole idea of life as a series of tours of duty, I think can be useful because just as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be some necessary endings as you go through life. You're going to do things, maybe not in a straight linear journey. It may be a path, it may be a crooked path, but life will be a journey and not necessarily just a straight shot or one thing at all, forever a thing. So that's my 10 thoughts for right now on the ideas for transitions and what you might do and the list of all these books will be in the resources so that you can explore them if you'd like. But again, like I say in the beginning, with an Encore life, you can be creating value in the world beyond just winning that next pickleball game or maybe that next piece of performance management. And you can learn to do the work you love when you want and where you want, and you can be living your dream. If you're ready to get started today, please contact me at lynn@lynnfrias.com or head over to my website at lynnfrias.com. Maybe you can listen to a few podcasts, get on the email list, see what you think. And please reach out and contact me. We'll see you soon, and thanks.